All right, we have two questions from 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. The first question is, list some things of the world we are tempted to love. And the second one is, how can we control what or who we love? I'll just read verse 15. Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, this is verse 16, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. So the question is, what are some things of the world that we are tempted to love? Now, initially when you think of this question, what comes to mind are those things of the world, the fornication, or the stealing, or the criminal behavior, or maybe even drug dealing, or some of those really terrible, vile things. But the first point I want to make is that John is writing here to Christians. He's writing to Christians. This is not an evangelistic letter. This is not a sermon on a street corner. He's writing to Christians. And when he's telling Christians, love not the world, then definitely the context is not specifically talking about those kinds of things, because Christians wouldn't be engaged in those kinds of things. So when we try to excuse ourselves by saying, well, I don't love the world because I don't love homosexuality, I don't like it, and so because I don't like homosexuality, I don't have the love of the world in me. And we excuse ourselves and even pat ourselves on the back because we have this hatred towards homosexuals, because we say that's a hatred towards the things of the world. But no, that's not what John is talking about here. The things of the world, and he gives us a little clue as to what kinds of things he's talking about in the next verse, in verse 16, all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the pride of life. Lust, a definition I've seen on lust is inordinate affection, an unhealthy, excessive desire, a desire for something that's forbidden, or something that's not good. And he's saying these are the things that are in the world. And he's going a step back from the actions, not just looking at the act of homosexuality, not looking at the act of fornication, the act of adultery, not looking at the act of stealing, not just looking at the act of murdering or killing, but looking at the principles behind it. In the example of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, what causes an individual to go towards adultery? The lust is first in his heart. And so John here is saying the lust is the problem. And if we are cherishing and petting those inordinate affections, those forbidden desires, this is the love of the world. And this goes much deeper than what I've thought about a lot of times when we see what's being forbidden in the Bible. What God is calling us to here and in other passages is not just right action. He is calling us to that, does desire us to do the right thing and avoid the wrong things. But more than that, firstly, he's calling us to right intentions, right desires. He wants to change the thoughts and the intents of the heart. He wants to mold our heart to be in harmony with his law. That's the new covenant promise, to write the law of God on our hearts. And so this is what John is going to hear. If we have in our heart the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, that's not in harmony with the law of God. And so that is in harmony with the world. This is the world in John's view. And so I think of myself where I don't necessarily watch as much television in general, and the things that I watch are much better than what I used to watch in the past. I don't watch many movies, and the movies I watch now are not the kinds of movies I watched in the past. That's okay, that's all well and good, that's great. But what John is calling us is beyond that. Not just avoiding watching these things, but what he's calling us to is taking our affections. Even though I'm not watching some of those movies, I noticed a lot longer after I gave up watching those kinds of movies or those kinds of television shows, I still like that kind of stuff. And I was still drawn to that kind of action, or that kind of humor, or that kind of drama. I like those kinds of plots. And what God is calling us to, what John is pointing out, is saying we need to be working on that. We need to be working first, yes, on not watching them. That's important. But I shouldn't say first. First, he's trying to work on taking out that love. The first step in taking out that love is to stop watching it. But the primary goal here is to get rid of that lust, get rid of that desire for worldly things. And when we have no desire for the worldly things, then obviously we will not be engaged in the worldly things. And this is what he's saying is the lust is the love of the world that we need to be avoiding. The next question was, how can we control who or what we love? Well, it's actually here in the passage. He says that we can actually have the love of the Father in us. And having that love of the Father in us, that will then root out that love of the things of the world.